Welcome to Hard Truths with Hardy. We're back. I'm so glad you're joining us for our podcast today. We're here in Rock Garden Subdivision in Sevier County. Today, we're going to talk about the best way to approach your home search. And I'm going to give you some ideas of what usually happens when people call me and say, hey, I want to look for a home. We're going to talk about that and maybe the best route to go instead of the route you think you should go. But first, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with me. I am working on growing the Hardy group. I'm looking for 2 agents, and I'm absolutely fine with new agents because I don't mind to train new agents. I find that it does work out really well when you can train them the way that you like to do things and get them on the right track from the very beginning, but I also don't mind existing agents. So I'm definitely looking for 2 more people. Really, that's probably the biggest thing going on. I've got several contracts and just trying to get those closed out, but everything is going really well. We've got some great team members already with the team, and I'm thinking about having them on. So if you'd like to see and meet some of the team on the podcast, let me know, and we'll have them individually join us some days in the future. Let's talk about home search. What usually happens when people are moving in from out of town, this is not what happens when people already live here, but people from out of town will call and say, I'm moving here from New York or Oregon or California. I've never been to Knoxville. Can you set up some home showings for us? And I'm like, is that the best avenue to take if you've never been to Knoxville, Tennessee? No. And the reason I say that is we can go look at homes, but if you know nothing about Knoxville, how do you know where you want to live? Because North Knoxville, South Knoxville, West Knoxville, all those are vastly different from each other. They all have their own culture, their own climate, and I don't mean weather, climate, but the feel. And so it's important to get out and look around the county and figure out what's a good fit for you and your family. So what I typically do is I try to talk to people in the beginning and say, tell me what's important to you. Do you want to be close to your work? What's a normal commute for you to work? How far is too far? Do you want to be 15 minutes to work or less? Or are you okay with an hour and you want to live in more of a rural place where you have more privacy? Those are the things that are important. Do you need to be close to shopping, dining, medical? All those are considerations that you need to make before you decide where you want to live. Some people will talk about walkability. Are there greenways? Well, there's not greenways everywhere in the county. They're more concentrated in some areas than in others. So I try to guide that conversation and find out the person's interests and what they're really looking for. And then that helps me get them going on the right path. But my suggestion will always be, come visit Knoxville. Knoxville's pretty broad. It's pretty spread out. Our county's wide. End to end, it's really about an hour's drive, whether you're going north to south or east to west. And I think it's a good idea to come in and look. And you don't necessarily need your realtor to go with you to drive around the county and see what you like. You can get a good feel driving around, checking out. Maybe you make a list of houses that you like and you just go drive by those. I tell people all the time, you'll knock out about half of that list just driving by the front. And in all likelihood, us going in to see those houses on that first trip is probably not what's most important unless you're in a massive rush, you don't have time to take into consideration where you want to live, and you have to be in a home in 30 days. Now, that's a little different scenario. If that's the case, we're just going to have to hustle and find a home in one day, right? But in most cases, it's important to look at the area. So make a list of houses, go drive by and see what you like. On the way to those houses, you're going to see what's in that area. Can I get to a grocery store easy? Is there an urgent care if the kids need to go to the doctor, or me or my spouse? Can we go out and eat? That's always a big consideration. People will say, well, am I going to have to go 30 minutes to go somewhere and have dinner? You'll want to know that before you move somewhere, right? So think about what's practical for your life. So when I moved to Knoxville, I'd never been here. I brought an atlas, I came to town, I asked a couple people, hey, where I should live. Nobody was really very helpful, if I'm being honest. So I just went out, found an apartment, and moved in. I'm thankful that I moved into an apartment. I stayed there for a year. I learned a little bit about the city. Before I purchased a home, I stayed in Knoxville about a year in an apartment. And I really, took some time to learn what was going on in West Knoxville, East Knoxville. Knoxville's grown a lot since I moved here 27 years ago. It doesn't look the same as it did back then. And even at that time, I had barely been to West Town Mall. But I did have an idea, at that time I didn't want to live right in the center of everything. I wanted to be somewhere a little more private. So I went to North Knoxville, and that worked for me for several years. I lived in North Knoxville for 11 years in a more rural area. It was still in a subdivision, but, there wasn't an Olive Garden and a nice restaurant in that area. We had some little local chains, but if you wanted to go somewhere popular to eat, you had to go to West Knoxville. I loved it out there, but now I've moved on to West Knoxville, and I've gotten kind of spoiled to the convenience of West Knoxville. If you want to go anywhere quick, live in West Knoxville, because you can go to shopping, dining, medical, all within usually 5 or 10 minutes. Once you get spoiled to that, it's hard to give it back. So I think it's important to get a feel for things, and don't feel like you got to rush. You can always rent a home, or if you're open-minded to, hey, I may need to move again in a year or 2 years to find something I like better, that's okay too. But a good approach is to visit the city and get a feel for what you might like before you start your home search. That's always my suggestion. Drive by and take a look at the houses, and then jump into your home search. If you're in Knoxville, or if you're thinking about moving to the area, we don't just service Knoxville, we service everything within a 1-hour perimeter of Knox County. We'd be happy to show you homes. I'm always ready to help you find your way home. And don't forget, our podcast comes out every Wednesday. You can find it on Apple, you can find it on Spotify or YouTube, and you can always link to it from our socials. We're happy to have you here, and if you want the hard truths, I'm your gal. No sugarcoating here. We'll see you next week.